Okay, we have a doozy for you today. We have a duet in the making. It is Wednesday, March 8th. Corporate taxes are due March 15th, personal taxes, April 15th. It is the happy season. Spring is coming, winter is thawing. The acceleration of the business is out there. I can feel it. We have a great guest, great show. But before we get rolling, I'm going to ask our own John Sibley Butler for some music.
Busted flat in Baton Rouge, waiting for a train, feeling about as faded as my jeans. Bobby thumbed the diesel down right before it rained. Took us all the way to New Orleans. I pulled my harpoon out of my dirty red bandana. I was playing soft while Bobby sang the blues. But then windshield wipers slapping time and Bobby's holding hand in mine. Sung all the songs that driver knew. Freedom just another word for nothing got to lose. Nothing don't mean nothing, but it's free.
John, your phone went muted.
Everybody's muted.
What happened? And you're muted, Greg. Unmute yourself.
You got me?
I got you.
Did you hear that?
I'll just play a little intro, all right?
Go ahead.
Just something for the people to a little traveling music, you know? Just a little intro.
I love guitar players. Bravo.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as I said to you all, we have a great show, but let me start with John. John Butler, how's everything going?
Well, everything is pretty good. I had some friends, more than one, call me about getting laid off, maybe from corporate America. As there was a great discussion yesterday with my Fed chairman, and he talked about raising interest rates. And we know when that happens, it's good for your bank account and my bank account, but it's not necessarily good for business. So you would expect that the stock exchange to go down, and you would expect some layoffs from the larger companies, since they can have $100 billion in the bank, but when their stock go down or they see some trouble ahead, they tend to lay people off. So that wasn't too good, but we talked a lot about different kinds of options. So we're in a different time now. Before we had COVID to worry about, and now we've got, as we have done in the past, we have to worry about now layoffs, especially layoffs from corporate America. But on the other side, the entrepreneurial stuff is really, really booming. I'm seeing more decks now that I've seen in a long, long time. And I'm passing those decks on to people who can literally fund those companies. And as we know, we look at the political stuff, it gets to be pretty interesting. I want you to know, you will like this, that we had a big Republican fundraiser at Barton Creek, and the lights went out last Friday. Everybody was, and the lights went out. But the other thing that's going on is the absolutely can-do spirit of the American people. As we think about these things, we're going to support the war in Europe forever if we need to. We're dedicated to that. We have an interesting situation for unemployment. It's very, very low, but who wants to work in what circumstances do they want to work in, right? Then, of course, we have the presidential elections coming up. And caught within it is the American people that is trying to juggle all of these things that come at them in the news for a new prosperity. But I think if we keep our heads high and hang with the core values of business enterprise and job creation in America, it will be interesting. But the world is a mess. It's a big mess, and I'm not even talking about the climate change issues I'm not talking about the fact that insurance companies will refuse probably now to insure homes in certain states because we have had a lot of natural disasters. So we look forward to solving these problems as we always have. So it's a pretty wild world.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And of course, Johnny is right. It is a bad world. Interesting things are happening there. We've just had a visit to Washington of Olaf Scholz, the new chancellor, or relatively new chancellor in Germany, and a key player in what's going to happen. Germany had allowed itself to get enormously close to Russia, become tremendously dependent on Russian oil and especially gas. And everybody expected that in some way it would cave to Russia and withdraw its support for Ukraine. It hasn't happened. It's been a very firm. It's managed somehow to get through the energy crisis with its industry so dependent on natural gas and many aspects of manufacturing. And it has survived, and it's quite inspiring to see Germany holding together in the face of so much financial pressure to do something else. We don't know. I don't think we'll have a war forever. I think that there will be a conclusion sooner rather than later. This is more my feeling than anything that is informed. I think the administration will push the Ukrainians into some sort of negotiated settlement with Russia, which will include which will not include a repossession by Ukraine of Crimea. We continue to forge towards a low carbon future without actually making any gains or no gains of any great significance because the world is so dependent on carbon fuels. And despite all the efforts towards renewable fuels, it is not happening very fast, especially in China, India, and other parts of the world. And I don't criticize those countries. They are trying. India in particular, which I follow fairly closely because it interests me. They're making a big effort, but they're still burning fossil fuels. And China has to burn fossil fuels to keep its economy going. So we're not going to get to where we think we're going to get, which is the administration's desire that by 2050, which is not that far off, that by 2050 we'll be net zero in the production of electricity. Well, what we may have instead by 2050 is an acute shortage of electricity. We are electrifying everything that can be electrified to reduce carbon emissions, and we are not getting enough alternative fuel, alternative generation online. And when it comes online, we don't have the transmission, get it from where the sun shines and the wind blows to the places where we need the electricity. So we're looking for a very bumpy future in terms of electric power. And I want to mention that Andres has been way out front, a leader in pointing to what happens if we electrify just transportation. We all go to electric vehicles. We will not be able to charge them because there won't be enough electricity. And if you go to all electric vehicles, you have to basically restructure much of the electric system to carry the extra load. It's very daunting. I'm sure we'll get through it, but it's very daunting. And so that's not a cheerful thing, just as spring is about to break out, but that's where we are.
Well, it's good that you bring that up, and I concur with the global challenges. But you know, as we focus on digital transformations in this show and talk about smart energy and smart cities, smart utilities, and smart buildings and the like, you know, the challenge, real quick, for those who are listening for the first time, is that 280 million vehicles in America that run around every day would need to get electrified at 100 kilowatt hour batteries each. That's 28,000 gigawatt hours needed versus the 1,100 that we produce today. Of course, they're not going to be charged at the same time, but the question is, how much new power do we need if we decommission all the coal and natural gas, that would be half of the production. So we go back down to 600 gigawatts. And then we need to deliver another, 20,000, 15,000 gigawatts, whatever the number is, and who's going to build that and who's going to pay for it. So I think that the answer is a combination of a distributed, centralized world that has a perfect spot landing on our new guest, because he is driving virtual power plants to the next generation. And so let me say hi to Gregg Dixon, and we can get into it.
Hi, Andreas. It's great to see you again. You're a legend, and I'm glad that I'm part of an esteemed panel here. This is exciting, and I really appreciate you having us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for those of you that don't know Gregg is a pioneer, and we in many ways stand on his shoulders of all the work that he did prior to his current company. We're going to find out more about Voltus, which I would call a next generation virtual power plant company. He can correct me on that. I think that Gregg, has a phenomenal track record of dreaming the future and executing on it, one day at a time, one utility at a time, one market segment at a time. Before Voltus, he was the Senior VP of Sales and Marketing at Enernaut, and that company had a great success in the early stages of sort of a commercializing and exploding demand response, eventually acquired by Enel, I believe. And then he was also the VP of Sales and Marketing at Aramida Hess, and he can tell us more about that. But if you know anything about Hess, is a large multinational that does all kinds of cool things. And then he, where he learned a lot about his selling and his marketing and his consulting was as VP of Business Development at Crayola. And I think that is a fascinating career stop. And then he started as a consultant in Oliver Wyman. I forget what Oliver Wyman used to be, Gregg. What was it?
Mercer Management Consulting.
That's right. That's right. And Gregg holds a bachelor's in computer science and business administration from a beautiful place where Doug Flutie threw the Hail Mary pass that nobody will forget, Boston College. Welcome to the show, Gregg.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So tell us, Gregg, you've heard the intro from my colleagues and my little preamble to your company. What's going on in your mind on energy, your market, Voltus 2023? Anything to share about maybe learnings from the COVID days? What's happening? What do you see happening? Where are you heading into?
Yeah, sure. So it might help to just frame what it is we do in terms that anyone can understand. Voltus is to electricity markets what Airbnb is to real estate, where Airbnb has a software platform that manages a two-sided market, that between owners of apartments and homes that may be underutilized, where they want to generate some additional cash from those assets, to the visitors who want better choice, better economics, and maybe more convenience by using that platform. Voltus does the same in its two-sided market with distributed energy resources on one side and power markets on the other that desperately want and need the value of those DERs that are aggregated and orchestrated into virtual power plants. So in essence, our platform today is connected to all 9 wholesale power markets in the US and Canada, and brings all DER types to those markets to deliver any product that those markets pay for. So those DERs can include electric vehicles, smart thermostats, electric arc furnaces at steel mills, data centers, hospitals, you name it. And then on the wholesale market side, those things can be aggregated to deliver capacity, energy, and ancillary services. So when you mentioned that Voltus is really a kind of next gen DER platform, that's true. And the promise of the platform is addressing the very things that you all mentioned, right? It's like we're going to have this increase in electricity demand for the first time in the past 10 years, right? I mean, it's been pretty flat. Now we're electrifying everything, but we're really flat-footed because it's hard to build central power stations and they're expensive. And we have a better alternative, which is aggregating these DERs that are lying fallow in plain sight everywhere at scale that can come to market economically, deliver reliability to markets that desperately need it in the face of climate change, and to do it in a sustainable way that more and more Americans are expecting.
Yeah, so make a comment real quick while these guys are formulating their attack into all your armor. FERC order 2222 is the beginning of the genie out of the bottle on DER on steroids. It calls for allowing at the wholesale market, the aggregators, whoever they are, to come in and take DER at the edge of the grid and aggregate it and play in the wholesale market. Tell me your thoughts on where the law is, how is the journey happening? You're already preempting that before it's even sort of blasted on steroids everywhere. Where are we on that? Is that helping out? Not? Comments.
Yeah, it's kind of a story of a hurry up and wait order, right? I mean, as you know, demand response has been integrated into these markets for about 20 years. And even these other DERs like electric vehicles, smart thermostats, energy storage, they have actually been able to participate in these markets as demand response resources, right? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. It's just demand response. And then we put some other names on it because maybe energy storage can inject power or distributed generation can inject power as opposed to just taking stress off of the grid. The problem with FERC Order 2222 is the devil's in the details, right? It's like you have MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, saying they need until 2030 to implement Order 2222. So one of the things we're really, it's important for us to mention is that the market doesn't require the implementation of 2222. To your point, it definitely will accelerate things and bring more innovation to market with DER sectors that have had a more difficult time getting to market because of existing wholesale power market rules, like, for instance, a 100 kilowatt minimum aggregation or amount or a minimum asset value. It's like, well, if you're going to bring in an electric vehicle, smart thermostat, in some of these markets, they have no path to market. So 2222 will definitely address some of those barriers. The problem is these ISOs and RTOs are asking for 5-year implementation timelines. And, as you know, the regulatory environment requires a back and forth, and it's going to take some time.
So there is a market, thank God, in the United States, primarily thank God to LBJ, but in the Texas bravado, where ERCOT is now privy to what FERC wants to do. And it's a market that you know very well. And you can do all these things. And it's kind of, ERCOT is working its way into injecting being a DSO on steroids and going below the 1 megawatt rule and all that. So where is that heading?
Well, ERCOT's a model market, as you mentioned. It's fantastic. And they're serious about it, right? Like, they want to be a power market that attracts employers, right? They want to keep power prices down. They want to address the reliability challenges that they experienced. I think ERCOT got kicked in the teeth a little bit unfairly. When you look at the reliability of that grid and the economics of that grid over, a fair timeline, it's still the best power market in the world. And now they're implementing some fixes that will be important. But, you look at the PJM capacity construct, it really fell flat on its face. And so I think ERCOT is very serious about getting it right and doing it quickly. And I think that they're going to lead the way in terms of DER system integration for everything from a smart thermostat to an EV to the traditional demand response that they already have.
Great to hear that, John Butler. You should feel good that ERCOT, the former butter in the refrigerator before anybody knew what it was in Armageddon, is actually doing it right.
Yeah, before I froze to death for 5 days, I'm happy that they are. Right. But let me just say this, Greg, I think you're in the business of complexity, or what we would say in chaos theory. You're dealing with the biggest machine in the world, and you have distributed energy, and you have a platform. Basically, it's a bit more complex than Airbnb because of these complexities, right? trying to figure out in advance, as you said, what the market would look like. So my question is a very, very simple one. Since you're dealing with what I call not only uncertainty, but complexity and chaos, how do you think about creating those models on your platform for the future? Let me ask it another way. Do you have integrated within your platform all of the weather information? Do you have integrated into your platform the history of the weather situation? So as a platform that does distributive energy and trying to predict when will it be needed, how do you sit around and think about what your customers will need in the future?
Yeah, it's a great set of questions. I'll unpack it as much as I can to answer your last set of questions specifically. Yeah, the software platform itself is a machine learning platform that pulls in all types of information to provide predictions for our customers on where power prices may be going, when there might be reliability events, when the grid may be experiencing an unexpected drop in wind or solar, and those flexible resources may be needed. So the software does that, and it gets better and better over time. What we tell our customers, the owners of the DERs, is that first, the primary use case of those DERs, like an electric vehicle, is not to monetize it in a power market, right? It's to be used as transport. However, we only use our cars 4% of the time. That 100 kilowatt battery is sitting around 96% of the time and can be monetized and can deliver grid services. So what we tell our customers is luck favors the prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It froze up a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Am I back?
Yes,
Yeah, you're back.
You're back. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, what we tell our customers is luck favors the prepared. And, anyone who tells you where they think power prices are going to go or when reliability events are going to happen is not somebody you should trust, because power markets are especially difficult to forecast, which gets to the point of, if you have the option value of being in the market and being able to monetize those DERs, going back to Winter Storm Uri, power prices were pegged at $9,000 a megawatt hour for almost an entire week. If you had a 100 kilowatt battery in your Tesla Model S, you'd pay for the entire thing in 1 week. And so our customers recognize that their resources that have a primary use case, when they're not being used very much, can be monetized and deliver good services and capture great value. That's what they want to do.
Right.
All right, let me ask you this before I move on to my other distinguished colleague. Is there a ranking in terms of the case need for the DER? Do you, as the computer learns, as the software learns, does it go through a ranking procedure as to what's needed more, houses versus cars versus whatever the X might be? So therefore, if you have a truly, all of a sudden you have a demand, much like a hospital, and I was a medic in Vietnam, and I had to rank those who might live versus those who might die. So the ones who might live became first. Do you have a learning algorithm that allows a ranking for those kinds of things?
Yeah, I wouldn't quite call it triage like you might have in your world, but there are in fact 3 factors that every DER carries in our system. The first is operational constraints. Not every DER, by its nature, can deliver its services every hour of every day, right? So there's operational constraints. The second is economic constraints. There's a cost of using a DER. It could be an on-site generator. It could be curtailing electricity for some short period of time. It could be dispatching an energy storage unit. There is an economic constraint to that. And the third is the market constraint, right? You have to impose market rules on these DERs and ensure that those DERs are meeting those market rules. Every DER on our system, and we've got about 4,000 megawatts on our platform today, over tens of thousands of different DERs, carry those 3 constraints. And when the software optimizes what it can deliver when, it's considering those 3 constraints.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Llewellyn?
I'd like to ask you, Greg, and it's good to see you. I'd like to ask you, do we have any operational experience Do we have anything we can point to where DERs are playing a substantial role at present, or is it all theoretical? Is it all in the future?
Yeah, there are hundreds of examples. In fact, we put out a press release this morning. It's very timely. During Winter Storm Elliott and PJM, when they dispatched their demand response portfolio, which is the largest demand response portfolio in the world, about 8,000 megawatts, they dispatched the whole shooting match to avoid a blackout. Our virtual power plant in PJM delivered 116% of its committed capacity performance at a time when 57,000 megawatts of central generation didn't show up in that market. Now, the PJM market has tens of thousands of DERs lying fallow that can be enabled to fill that gap. It would have turned out to be the single worst blackout in human history, but for distributed energy resources showing up and filling that gap. Now, that's one example, and that's a recent one. But we're dispatched, I think last year we were dispatched 3,000 times. Some of that's for economic purposes, some of it's reliability. A good example is in the Southwest Power Pool, where there's a tremendous amount of wind generation, and the forecast error of that wind is, pretty significant. It goes, it's just meteorological. We're dispatched about 30 times a month in that program to balance wind. So these DERs are the ideal dance partner for intermittent renewables, and we're going to see more and more of that in the future.
Yeah.
But building on what you just said, what is the ideal DER partner? Is it a home with an electric car? Is it an industrial installation? Is it maybe a mining company that uses a lot of electricity?
It depends on the product that the power market is buying. So there are three major products, right? There's capacity, there's energy, and ancillary services. When I describe these products to people, I basically say capacity is like the peak horsepower of the engine in your car, right? It's the ability to deliver energy at its peak. Energy is the gasoline in your car's tank and determines for how long you can deliver that peak demand or that peak power output. And then your transmission is like the ancillary services, which is balancing supply and demand in real time. So if I use ancillary services as an example and talk about the ideal DER type, ancillary services are used to balance the grid when, say, lightning hits a transmission wire, right? It takes out a transmission path. Or a large nuclear plant unexpectedly goes offline because the inlet cooling temperature of the water is hitting an upper control limit. So these balancing resources are needed quickly, but they're needed for a short period of time in order for the grid to rebalance. Perfect DER for that is air conditioning, right? Because you can shut off air conditioning to every home and business for 10 minutes, and the thermal inertia of those cooled spaces won't really change in a meaningful way. We've got 200,000 megawatts of cooling load in the summer on an 800,000 megawatt system peak in the United States. All of that can be enabled to deliver a balancing resource that these grids traditionally buy from central power stations.
Well, great. Let me ask this. What's the competitive landscape that you have? That if I ask you about, again, about the learning mechanism, and everything does not become standardized over the platform, what's your competitive landscape look like? Who are your competitors? What are the other companies that's trying to solve the same problem? What keeps you awake at night in terms of competition? Or when things go out, is there enough energy for everyone, or do you have to be competitive with your prices and competitive? Talk to me about the competitive landscape, and especially going into the future as the Internet of Things become more grateful.
Yeah, let me before Greg jumps in, and I don't know if he wants to talk about all competitors. In my opinion, as a former utility guy, the biggest competition is the culture of the utility, where they want to, they still, and Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, still don't know how to do DER forecasting integrated into how they do forecasting, and they have a hard time trusting that all those potential dispatchable DER assets can actually be dispatchable. So there's a whole retraining the utility guys running the show. But go ahead, Greg.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
You asked me to jump on him, and now are you serving as his lawyer to explain what? If I wanted you to ask the question, I would have asked you.
I am setting up a larger framework.
Yeah.
Okay. Go
Well,
ahead,
look, John, I can take a punch. And I love the question about competition. And Andreas really hits the nail on the head. The number one competitor is the utility, right? There's 3,300, 3,200 electric utilities in the United States. Interestingly enough, only about 400 of them have a DER program of some sort. Most of those are legacy interruptible rate programs, and mostly for large industrial customers. So that's, the inertia of those programs often poses a competitive barrier to us, depending on the market. The second type of competitor are energy suppliers. So reps, retail energy providers in Texas are often trying to bring their own DER programs to market. They tend to not be very good at it because they're not technology companies. They're not really thinking about how to reduce the consumption of megawatt hours, right? It's not really an incentive for them. So they've kind of used that as a loss leader. And a lot of them have kind of gotten out of it because they recognize it's just not in their cultural DNA. Then you've got what I would call legacy demand response companies, like my former company, Enernoc, that was sold to Enel. There are lots of regional players where they might get a foothold in the New York ISO market or the Cal ISO market, but they're not delivering their services across all of the markets. And then I'd say the last category are new technology companies. And that might even include Tesla. Like Tesla's their own energy provider in ERCOT. Mm-hmm. Like a STEM, they're bringing energy storage to market, and they're trying to figure out how do they integrate into these wholesale power markets. So it's the competitive landscape is fragmented. The good news is there are going to be dozens of winners because the market is so big for how many DERs are out there. Right now, there's about 2.4 million megawatts of DERs globally. And as an example, in the United States, as you guys were talking about this earlier, there will be 2 million megawatts of lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles in America, in the US by the year 2030, right? Our peak demand in the US is 800,000 megawatts. So maybe peak demand in 2030 goes up to, 1 million megawatts, 1,000 gigawatts. Mm-hmm. But we have these DERs at scale that can also deliver their services to cover that gap. Mm-hmm. And we're going to need a lot of successful companies to serve.
So Greg, real quick, hold on, Johnny. So give me a comment on. So Ed Castellet has been talking about transactive energy forever. I'm not so sure that anybody who's trying to attack that opportunity with virtual power plants disagrees at all with, what that is all about. The question is, how do you go about deploying that? So they have their own platform, their own solution, their own, call it a specification of how that should be done. Then there's another company that is doing it on blockchain, different technology, different approach like Power Ledger. And then you got the guys from GridX, right? And so some folks are sitting here from the bottom up. You're sitting here at the ISO level, which is, I think, the right way of doing it. How do you think this comes about? I mean, is Tesla, do you see Tesla convincing the nation that they're going to, and their customers, that they're going to manage all their batteries as an aggregate? Is Volkswagen going to do the same? General Motors going to do the same? How is this? What is this looking like, Greg? And I know it's a bit of a crystal ball thing, but what is this looking like?
Yeah, there are many dimensions to it, and I'll break it down so that we can talk about the constituent technologies required to fully unlock the value of DERs. First, we've got the transmission and distribution level, right? So if we think about the physical grid, we've got the wholesale power market at the transmission level with ISOs and RTOs, and then we've got the distribution level, which is primarily the utilities, right? And they all need capacity, energy, and ancillary services. They may call it something different, but that's what they need. Then we've got, because of the balkanized nature of these power markets, you've got to deal with 9 different wholesale market open access transmission tariffs. They're OATTs that are all about 7,000 pages. They all use a different lexicon. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. You know, it's like having an FAA for the Northeast and an FAA for California or the West Coast. It's crazy. If you're an engineer and you were to design this system from the ground up, you'd have one market, a standard market design, but we don't. And so we've got to deal with that regulatory and market construct, number one. Second, as I mentioned earlier, each of these DERs has operational market and economic constraints. So you have that dimension you've got to figure out how the connectivity and the automation of that stuff is going to work within the transactive nature of these markets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the blockchain thing I think is sexy and buzzworthy, but it doesn't have much of an application in these markets right now. It may in the future. We've looked at it pretty closely. I think it's kind of a niche.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got all of the connectivity, the networking, the data flow, the standardization of how you measure the performance of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you're seeing a lot of companies come at it from like an application perspective of saying, hey, we're going to help utilities figure out how to optimize their distribution challenge for EVs and how to control them and how to turn them into a DER in one market.
Mm-hmm.
Our point of view on this is if you're GM, you're Ford, you're Tesla, you're STEM, you have these technologies, you want to put those things everywhere, right? Tesla doesn't just sell EVs in California and Texas. They want to sell them everywhere. And they've got to figure out, do they want to build their own software system and manage those EVs connecting to these markets? And our contention is that would be stupid. That's not your business. It's a wicked pain in the ass. It's super expensive to do it. You need specialized expertise, and it's just a huge distraction for you. So if you look at like Google and what Google Nest has done, there's a Google Nest over my shoulder here. That is in the distribution level, national grid, rush hour rewards program. In order to bring it into the ISO New England market, because I'm in Boston, you need a completely different setup. And so our thesis is these large DER technology partners really want a single platform to bring their resources to market, to deliver to consumers the benefits that DERs do anywhere and everywhere. And they don't want to do it themselves because it's really complex, going back to your earlier point about complexity.
Yeah. Hence, for the whole audience, why we don't need to wait for FERC 2222. It's already happening.
I'd like to inquire, Greg, how do you sign up people, and who is your customer? Is it the utility? Is it the ISO? Or is it the DER?
Well, it's all of them. So
Who pays you?
Yeah, the wholesale market. So predominantly our business is focused on the wholesale power market, and we compete. I should say, you know, I didn't mention the fact that our megawatts are competing with traditional power suppliers, right? We compete with gas plants, hydro, nuke, solar. All those megawatts are coming into a wholesale power market, and they're clearing based on their megawatt price pairs that clear in the market. Our actual customer in reality is that wholesale power market, right? We're making a commitment to deliver capacity, energy, ancillary services at a certain level at a certain time. And we aggregate those DERs into a virtual power plant to deliver that. Now, the way the money flows is the wholesale power market pays Voltus, and then we share a portion of that payment with our customers, like a Walmart. So Walmart's a good example where they have every type of DER at their locations. They've got 5,000 stores in the US and Canada. They're served by hundreds of different electric utilities. They operate in all 9 wholesale power markets. They have distributed generation in Texas to back up their entire store. They've got EV charging to attract the Ford F-150 Lightning shopper. They've got solar plus storage. They've got building management system control. And they need to automate all of that. They don't want the store manager in Bentonville, Arkansas, running into the back office to flip switches to monetize those things in wholesale power markets. They need a technology platform to do it all for them. And so that ultimately is our customer. Even though we are paid by the market, the customer is, in this case, Walmart, because we have to integrate our technology to help them monetize that stuff.
If you take a small utility that is primarily residential, I'm thinking of one in particular, and this one happens to be quite aggressive in its DER, how would that fit in with you? it's running a very aggressive DER of its own, and in fact, relying on it for the future to some extent. How would they fit in with you? Do you undercut them? Do you go in with them? Or do you manage their system for them?
It could be any of those things. They could be a competitor. They could see our technology as something that adds to what they're currently doing. They could say, hey, we don't really want to do this. We'd rather just you do everything plus the additional things you do that we don't do. So very often we'll run into like a co-op, for instance. And that co-op may be operating a DER program for their larger C&I customers, but it's expensive, right? They've got 100 megawatt system peak territory. They've got like 3 or 4 resources dedicated to manually managing this program. And they're only delivering one type of product to their customer. And let's say that co-op is in the MISO territory. Well, in MISO, you can deliver 4 different wholesale market products. You can deliver capacity, energy, ancillary services, and peak transmission cost avoidance. No co-op does that. They tend to deliver one interruptible rate program, or they might have a residential, switching program. We can come in and basically say, this is costing you way too much, and you're not delivering as much value to your customers. So you can outsource it to us, and you're going to have a better customer experience. You're going to spend less, which the costs, reduce costs in there to the co-op members.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say that I'm a Rockefeller, I'm a Butler fellow, excuse me. And Greg, I'm looking at all of the development of the technologies and how they're developing and the networking of everything. And I conclude that I want to vertically integrate this whole big system. That means I want to own everything. Much like Microsoft, when they did Microsoft Office, we used to go get Microsoft Office or Word from somewhere else and put it on the computer. And actually, technology would allow me to vertically integrate this thing and to become one large company. So what you do would be automatically integrated, vertically integrated on the grid for the utilities. And you get with all of the policyholders. And we say that, it's a mature industry, but technologically wise, it's a very immature industry. Can you see a day, can you vision with me that a day might come when a Butler fella comes down and vertically integrate the whole thing into one dynamic system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are the Butler feller. That's what we're attempting to do. The difference, though, is we don't want to own the asset, right? We're not owning.
No, it's a public-private. You cannot.
Yeah,
right.
We want to be the network. We want to be the platform that connects the market. We want to sit in the middle. We want to be the network and the digital transaction platform. We like to say we go from the machine to the meter to the market to the money. So when you're a large big box retailer on our platform, we pull all your DERs into the market. We monetize them in any program that we can, whether it's at the transmission or the distribution level. And then you see all the digital transactions on the platform and exactly when and how they're flowing into your bank accounts. So that's really the goal is to, and I think Llewellyn was asking this earlier, we have a one-page contract. We take all the risk, we bear all the costs, we enable our customers with our technology for free, and we take a toll on the road, right? We take a percentage of the revenue and value we generate, and that keeps our interests aligned with our customers. But yeah, we're trying to be the platform for every DER in the world.
So Greg, when houses come on at the edge, when we figure out the automation of the relationship between the edge and the grid edge, so you would just integrate the houses within your platform.
Yeah, like Google, Nest, Residio, Ecobee, they all have the ability to remotely control through an API, a standard API that they publish, their devices. And as soon as that consumer essentially says, I'm willing to give up control for some percentage of the hours of the year, we're off to the races. And the same is going to be true with EVs. You know, the EV in my garage, I'm frustrated with, doesn't have the same interfaces that Google Nest, but eventually will. And on your EV interface, you'll see, hey, would you like to make $50 a month by participating in the Rush Hour Rewards program for GE or GM, Ford, or Tesla, right? And then you're going to be asked to say, what percentage of your battery capacity are you willing to contribute to those grid services? And it's going to be a real slick user interface. And then behind the scenes, Voltus will be what is transacting and controlling that EV.
But it has to be automated. I mean,
It has to be automated.
It's not automated now, so you cannot automate it. I mean, I don't want to be in my car trying to, figure out how to do it. I want it to be automated. And I signed an agreement early on when X, Y, and Z, if this happens, like a Markov chain, then bam,
Yeah.
then you can do that. Okay. Uh-oh.
Llewellyn just gone.
So the
Well,
future,
This
Purple.
happened to me yesterday when I was making a television show. The only thing for me to do is to reboot. So
No,
it's
don't reboot. We don't want to lose you. We don't want to lose you.
I
I think you look wonderful in pink. Yeah, we don't want to
Very
reboot you.
nice of you. I
How do
want
I get that?
There was a recent study, Greg, from Pacific Northwest Labs, talking in very elaborate future for transactive energy. But it seemed to require a certain amount of hardware if you're going to take full advantage, say, in a large building, a skyscraper, perhaps. Where do you fit in that, and how do you have you seen that study, and can you respond to it?
Yeah, I mean, Andreas will appreciate this. A lot of those LBNL studies, they come like years after the technology there is actually out there. They predict something that's already in existence. It's like, and I think, Andreas, you coined the term smart grid, I think, right?
Yep.
Did you coin it?
Yep.
You coined it like 20 years ago, and then you see these studies coming out from national labs in 2018 that we're going to have a smart grid. It's like, this stuff it's in practice. I'll often get the question, well, what technology needs to be invented in order to make this a reality? And the answer is nothing. The technology exists. There's more of a need to address the regulatory and legal barriers of getting resources into the market.
Totally.
I agree. Everything is sitting on the shelf already. I agree.
This isn't rocket science. We're not sending a man to the moon.
No, it is rocket science, but it's sitting on the shelf. Yes.
So Greg, real quick, I'm looking at the time here, and I want to be able to jam at the end too. You guys got to end up with a big jam.
We're gonna let Greg take us out.
Yeah, I'm thinking, Greg. Clearly, again, you've been at it for a long time, and we thank you for all the innovation you've been managing and benefits into the marketplace, helping so many to see the lights and get the epiphanies. Other than policy re-engineering and the challenge of integrating an old model that was created 130 years ago to a new model that is emerging still, I would imagine, give me the top 3 hurdles that are manageable. I would imagine that DER integrated into integrated forecasting is a challenge. Do you do that for the utilities? If so, talk about it. I would imagine that Walmart or Home Depot or a smelter or General Motors factory in Anderson, Indiana, that all those companies that used to think that they were, whatever they did, they sold goods that make manufacturing. But now that energy is a business that everybody can get into and a facility can turn into exporting energy, why wouldn't a Walmart or anybody sell energy to their neighbors? And why wouldn't we start creating islands and microgrids at a new pace? What's your thoughts on those 2 things?
Yeah, that's all good stuff. The 3 things that I think we need to have and we can have these things actually pretty quick. It really comes down to political will. The 3 things are standard market design. We need a standard market design. In fact, Pat Wood, who was a FERC commissioner years and years ago, probably 20 years ago now, suggested standard market design. Of course, the states threw up all over it. But the bottom line is we all understand the socialized benefits of these wholesale power markets.
Yep.
We need a single market. It's foolish that we don't have one. We got to get there. Second thing is we then need transmission, right? Because we know that if we just paved the entire state of Rhode Island, which is a tiny state, with solar, it would provide all of our energy needs, right? It's just a very small footprint that solar is needed to produce a lot of energy. Well, we can do that, but only with transmission, right? For wind and solar to wheel the power where it needs to go. So we got to solve the transmission issue. And then the third thing I'd say is we need a carbon market. Those three things, the technology that we have, it exists, right? We can unleash that, the commercialization, it's done. I'm sure there's innovation in all those areas, but if we get those three things done, we will achieve energy independence. We will have less expensive energy, more reliable energy, and it will be sustainable. And everybody can get behind that. Everybody can get behind it.
So is that the Gregg Dixon platform for the White House in 2042?
I am not an electable official. But Greg, what you didn't say was that who wants to be in the electric business? So Walmart should not want to be in the electric business. And it's like a bank. The reason why we have drive-through tellers at banks is so that the bank can see all the cars that they own. But they don't want to be in the car business, right?
Sure. I can agree with that.
Yeah. So he said, why won't Walmart, create their own electric supply for the neighborhoods? Well, I don't know if they want to be in the electric business.
But isn't the electric business quite attractive because it has very large cash flow, and small margins and large cash flow, which is very attractive to many companies.
Yep.
Yeah, you got to have it. That's for sure.
Yeah, the challenge is, of course, we have utilities that get a guaranteed rate of return. When you're an independent power producer, when you're a retailer, you're taking all the risk. And so it's like, if you have a regulated monopoly and you're a utility and you get a 10% guaranteed rate of return, I love getting a higher return than that, but it's volatile. I'd put every penny of my portfolio in a 10% guaranteed rate of return every year.
Right.
Yeah. So Greg, what keeps you up at night? Given the fact that the money is flowing and technologies are changing, what keeps you up at night? Is it the changing technologies? Is it the utilities themselves? Is it ISO? What keeps you up at night as a manager?
It's just two things. It's just talent. We've grown very quickly. We're a little more than 6 years old. We got 300 employees, and that. You don't hire these folks right out of college with a degree in distributed energy resources, right? We have to build that muscle memory. We have to do a lot of training. The good news is a lot of folks are leaving technology and getting into the ESG space, the clean tech space. They want a job with a purpose. And so that's been a trend that has really helped us. But I stay up at night thinking about how do we continue to hire great talent. And then the second thing is the regulatory environment. It's very politicized. With the stroke of a pen, with the change of a politician in office, barriers can be put in place that really hurt our business. And so that's why we hired the former longest standing chairman of FERC, John Wellinghoff, to make sure we're keeping an eye on those landmines.
Well, let the record show that I want a job that put foods on the table, whether or not it has a purpose or not. Just let the record show that, please.
That's a good 2023. That's a good purpose.
That's a good purpose, he said.
So Greg, be a little selfish right now and share with us what's ahead of Voltus and Gregg Dixon 6 months ahead.
So we've got a whole host of new innovations that we are rolling out. We have new programs available for customers. One of the hot things that our customers are interested in is measuring in real time their avoided emissions. So we have big tech companies that are buying the avoided emissions because, as you might imagine, on peak emissions are at their highest because we're dispatching single cycle gas plants and oil plants. And so when we use DERs, we're avoiding significant emissions. So a lot of these tech companies are buying those emissions reduction credits. And we're the only company that does it in real time because we have real-time electricity monitoring And our partner, Watt Time, provides us with real-time emissions views of the grid. And so we're able to create fungible emissions reduction credits. And then I'd say the next thing is we are enabling more and more residential DERs in the wholesale power market. We're the first to really do it. We brought smart thermostats into the PJM market and recently smart thermostats into the MISO market. And we've got a really, really interesting program where we're going to be rolling out more smart thermostats to the 80% of American households that don't actually have a smart thermostat, which is pretty shocking considering that the payback on a smart thermostat is like 9 months. So we want to accelerate that and get a DER in every American home.
Ooh, I love that. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. You heard it first here. Actually, we haven't shared this with anybody outside the organization, but that's a preview.
Yeah. Well, you probably know, Greg, also that I work at the university, Texas State University, and I'm building all these 14 living labs in 800 acres. And we are actually issuing an RFP for a solar PV farm, 64 megawatts, 160 acres that is going to house our smart energy and utilities lab. And then we have our annual conference coming up, the Utah 360 Summit, September 26th through the 29th. I shall follow up with you and invite you to join us. When the conference has been going on for 4 years, usually Llewellyn and John get on stage, and a couple of years ago they did a sumo wrestling fight, and last year they did a mud slinging fight, and I don't know what's going to happen this year.
Oh,
but
it's going to be all lovey now. We're all lovey now. It's going to be tight.
We want a Jello pit.
This year we're going to the county line.
So,
Greg, let me just say this. Greg,
yeah, go ahead.
I like the real time because remember that we can plan for the future in the business world because of finance. That is, we can project things. Finance made insurance possible. It made buying a house possible, and et cetera. And when you started doing the real time stuff, then you can really do the mathematics, if you will, or the equations, if you will, or the algorithm that really gives us a future. We don't talk much about the future in distributive energy or in energy period. We talk more about the now and the present. And the now for me is turning the light on. We just assume that the future was there. Once we move to real-time kind of data, then you can really project out into the future, just as we do. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, just as we do in the stock market, or when they tell me, okay, you're 25, let's buy this insurance, and by the time you're 60, it'll be worth $800,000. So we need to think in those terms about projections and securing a future for energy for the country.
Amen.
Amen. Even Llewellyn liked that one. He didn't say anything. My gosh.
I hate to say amen around you, because you may take it as an endorsement. And,
you know how shy.
You know how loath I would
am,
be to
Llewellyn.
endorse anything you said, Johnny.
Would like Llewellyn,
to
I'm taking shy lessons right now. I'm taking shy lessons. I'm so shy.
Greg, ignore Dr. Butler. We have a green baize thing we put over him when he gets like this, like a parrot. Yeah, it helps enormously. He's quite calm after we take it off. That's right. Anyway, what I'd like to ask you is at the beginning of this program, I said, and I was endorsed by Andres, that we're looking at a huge shortage in electric supply moving towards 2050. How much of that deficit will DER be able to fulfill?
Well, our contention and our calculations and extensive research on this show that DERs 20 years from now will deliver half of our new resource needs. That the grid will at some point in the next 20 years be supplied by DERs delivering 50% of the power. Keep in mind that solar and storage behind a meter are DERs, and distributed generation are DERs, and EVs are DERs. And we think that that will come to pass because of the innate economic reliability and sustainability of DERs.
Yeah, totally agree.
Very interesting.
So Greg, hopefully you'll come and join us at Digital 360 Summit. Thank you for being here today with us. I love what you're doing. Always been a big fan of yours. Wish you all the success in the world. And if we can ever help you out, CMG, Texas State, myself, John, Llewellyn, don't hesitate to call on us. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. All right. Final thoughts. I'm going to get sappy and just say that I think what we all need to do is be constructive and to be loving and to recognize that we need all forms of power right now to ensure that our economies are well supported, that we're taking care of human beings with reliable resources as we make an important transition to clean energy that will benefit everybody. But right now, we need coal, we need gas, we need nukes, we need all of the above to help us bridge there. And all of the folks whose shoulders we've stood upon, the coal miners and the oil derrick workers, we need to have a solution for them too. We need everybody to win, and everybody can win. And I encourage everybody to be constructive and inclusive as we make this clean energy transition.
Bravo,
Well
bravo.
said. Well said.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. John Butler, stop fidgeting. You're getting us dizzy. You can't hear us? Really?
Well, it's better we can't
He
hear.
wants me to play. He's asking me to play guitar. I put the guitar up for the day. But John, we're somehow gonna do a duet live.
Well, at least you should have a.
John, actually, you need to bail him out. John is saying that he cannot play guitar. You have to bail him out.
Well, thank you very much for having us. As always, Andreas, it's great to spend time with you. Llewellyn and John, it was great to meet you, and I hope to get down to Texas.
Very interesting and very informative for me. Ask your people to send me that press release. I can use it.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop recording now.
Well, I'm not